Dear Dr. MacKenzie, or as most of us would really say, Dear Larry, this film is a small offering to you from the Department of University Extension. We give it because of the warm affection we have had for you for many years, a small token of thanks for the support and understanding you extended to us in your long term of office as President of UBC. In some ways, this gift is like a glowing glass of Drambuie. Though coming late in the banquet and of small dimensions, Drambuie nonetheless has its real values. A well-aged mixture of precious ingredients, including, of course, some noble Scotch. It pleases the eye, caresses the nostrils, softly blesses the palate, and when finally consumed, brings a long-lasting glow to the soul. This film, then, like Drambuie, is a mixture, part old, part of recent vintage. In sections, at least, it has color, and our hope is that it will please your palate and bring warmth to your heart, not only once, but many times in the years that stretch ahead. So here it is, a mixture, at the core of which is one unifying figure, a Drambuie figure, strong but warm, you. Before you first came to the campus as president in 1944, the university had had its troubles, but its triumphs too. Its birth had taken place in the shacks and huts of Fairview. A glance will suffice for that segment of history. But the students then were no more passive than those of your own regime. With the end of the First Great War, they declared their own little war on a penny-pinching government, calling for a move to the Point Grey campus, where the skeleton of the science building stood gaunt and lonely, and declaring in no uncertain terms that sardines have nothing on us. They patiently circulated petitions with which to sting politicians into action, and they organized the Great Trek of 1922. It started first by a great parade of floats and decorated cars through the downtown areas of the city. It ended when the students, making their way by footpath from Sassamat and 10th, reached the present campus and swarmed in their hundreds over the bones of that massive unfinished building, making its whole frame shake with a testing unforeseen by the structural engineers who had designed it. But all held firm. And at the end of that day, one might well have remembered the words of old Ezekiel. Thus saith the Lord God unto these bones, Behold, I will cause breath to enter into you, and ye shall live. And breath and life did come to the Point Grey campus. So when you assumed office, sir, you looked out on well-groomed grounds. You saw a total of 2 permanent buildings and a small number of semi-permanent buildings, semi in this context meaning indefinitely permanent. And you saw, too, a campus involved in yet another world war. It is true that there were normal students taking normal courses, but by and large, the university then looked more like a joint services military academy than an institution dedicated to the pursuit of higher learning in the realms of Plato, St. Thomas, Shakespeare, Newton, Einstein, and Dewey. The sharp voices of Colonel Shrum and his training officers re-echoed from the mountains across Howe Sound. Awkward squads paraded awkwardly until they were awkward no longer. The armories were built, small arms rattled, large guns boomed, and thousands of the best were trained for the Navy, the Army, and the Air Force. They even learned to do the advanced alphabet, using boots instead of pens, and could shape as neat a UBC as did their forerunners in the days of the Great Trek. But this atmosphere was your own meat, sir. You had survived, and with distinction, one great war, and that in the ranks of the PBI, and with you, when you came, you brought a knowledge of the ways of war as well as of the ways of peace. When peace finally did return to the world, it brought in its wake thousands of fresh problems, thousands of new things to do. Students swarmed the campus as never before, but students you always loved, even as they loved you. From the first you mingled with them, attended their events and ceremonies, religiously, repeat, religiously kissed the beauty queens. You accepted traditions and became part of traditions. Early you met sons and daughters of great trekkers and became firm friends with men and women who had themselves been great trekkers. Annually you attended the cairn ceremony, held beside that mound of stone built by the early marchers to commemorate their pilgrimage. You enjoyed speaking by the cairn, surrounded each year by new groups of young people who were being introduced to the university community. Nor did you ever forget the annual service commemorating those who had died in the war just ended and in the First Great War. In your early days here, that service was held outdoors in front of the block, usually in that cold gray mist that so often descends on our world on the 11th of November. But the gray sadness of the day was well suited to the brave sorrow of the occasion, making even more vivid than ever the poignancy of deep-felt sadness. But fixed occasions were but a small part of your routine. With the end of the war had come the Great Invasion. The massed phalanxes of returning veterans moved in a Niagaran rush towards the campus. To them you opened wide what few doors you had. But you also remembered the old adage, "What the army hath left, the university shall tow away." From hills and valleys, from far and near, came huts, small, medium, large. They came as if by magic, but mostly by truck. They were dropped in rows around the perimeter of the campus. Some came roofless, to have roofs placed on them by lumbering cranes. So without the elegance of the Parthenon, they had something of its simplicity, and they did provide shelter from incessant rains, warmth, at times too much, against the drafting cold, and eventually blackboards on which harassed instructors might write obscure symbols and obscurer formulae, and chairs on which some 10,000 students might recline in varying degrees of comfort. But huts, even by the hundreds, did not answer all the pressing needs of the moment, and soon the voices of the students were added to your own. The spirit of the great trekkers came back to the campus, but this time the new trekkers wanted a gymnasium, a memorial gym to commemorate the heroism of fighting students, a modern gym to satisfy the requirements of an exploding campus. Mass meetings were held. Male students, members of council, made impassioned speeches. Cute kids in skirts led cheering rallies. And you yourself gave active support to the campaign. Monies were pledged by the students, and further monies were given and granted by alumni, by friends, and by government. Soon the plans were on the drawing boards, and soon construction would start. In the meantime, permanent buildings to relieve the pressure on the already bulging huts had to be built, and in a hurry. You quickly became a specialist in arranging for that time-honored ceremony known as sod turning. Though skilled in the use of the spade, your early prairie life had taught you many skills. You saw to it, and protocol demanded it, that others did most of the manual labor. Dignitary after dignitary grabbed the ceremonial tool to make the initial jabs with varying degrees of skill. The first of such ceremonies, if memory does not trick us, was for the physics building. It was really quite a gala affair, with cabinet ministers, governors, deans, distinguished scientists, students, including the Jokers Club, and alumni, all on hand as willing witnesses. After a round of obviously brilliant speeches, it was the Chancellor who made the opening incision, while photographers trained their cameras on the beautiful polish of his well-groomed feet. Gordon Schrumm's new palace of science was on its way to becoming something more than a dream, a reality. Years later, sir, you were still at it, but this time the building that is being born is one to be devoted to the arts and the humanities. The Buchanan Building. The Honorable Minister of Education is now the specialist with the spade, and a well-beloved perpetual dean looks on while sweet Mrs. Buchanan remembers another much beloved dean after whom the building was named. After sod turnings came construction. For example, that of the physics building, shown here as it takes shape around the massive theater classrooms that seem to rise from a sea of dirt. And later still, that of the biological sciences building, with its spreading stately structure assuming form. Until, before we knew it, the campus had become a field of noble buildings, a few of which we now see. The first library addition, home economics, the engineering building, biological sciences, the memorial gymnasium,